Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our monthly customer webinar for Evolve electrical users. This session is for our users to get a chance to work directly with our customer success and product team. We demonstrate features. We'll go over some common questions that we hear, and then we'll be taking your questions live and reviewing those answers today. So please make sure to submit your questions through the Q&A function. If for some reason we don't have time to get to your question at the end, we will follow up after the webinar through email. And here's a look at our dedicated customer success and product team who will be on the call today. This webinar is being recorded and we'll forward the recording to all registrants. And you can always find more of our webinar recordings on the Evolve YouTube channel. So with that, I am handing it over to Adam Heon today.
Thanks, Marina. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here, and a few things I'm going to cover today. I'll give a quick overview of the 7.0 update that's going to be coming out. I won't go into details of the features, but once it's released, I'll go through it, probably in next month's webinar in more detail. But kind of the top three things that'll be coming out will be a quick dimension tool, basically pulling dimensions off center lines or edges of system families, whether it's tray or conduit. Also, we're supporting multi-tier alignment. So instead of doing like a tier by tier selection, basically you can select an entire group and it'll space them out. And then the third one here is the supporting of angled spools. So if your spool drawing is not square to the project, you'll notice that it comes in basically at the angle that's drawn at. So this feature will allow Evolve to detect what that angle is, and it'll attempt to rotate the views to square everything up for you on your spool sheets. So definitely a bunch of other things, as always, enhancements and bug fixes that we put in there. But like I said, I'll go through these in more detail once this is out. So main topic, or two topics that I'm going to cover today, are kind of the two most common support issues that come in. One of them related to families and error messages that you may get, or windows that pop up on you that aren't very clear what's happening. So I just want to kind of go through that kind of process and what's happening there. And then the other one will be dealing with our title blocks, how to configure them, and again, also some common mistakes that happen and what that looks like and how to fix them. So as I'm going through this, feel free to post any questions on these topics as I'm going through it. If you have other questions, I'll save those for the end if they're off topic, just for the sake of time, and so I don't get distracted here. So go ahead and post questions in the chat or the Q&A window. All right, so the first one here, families coming out of the family browser. So there's two main issues that occur here. So I'm going to just start a brand new project. I'm going to get a couple of these things to happen here. So the most common one is when Evolve detects a conflict with a nested element, and it's prompting you to basically load a family or choose a directory where it goes. So this is what basically happens. Let's just say I have a point file or a point in my project, and in this project, I'm going to edit this family. So it's not our standard default Evolve point. So I'll come in here and just add a type comment. So I added a change to this. I'm going to load this back into my project. Okay, so now this project file has an existing Evolve point right here, but it's modified. So what's going to happen now, is if I try to load a family from the Evolve browser that also contains that family, which for a point family, it happens often because a lot of families have them. Evolve's going to warn you on this. And to trigger this, I'll load a conduit here. And here's the message. So it's saying there's a conflict was detected. The file name of the family has been copied to your clipboard, and you can paste it into the dialog of the next window that appears. So essentially what's happening is there's a conflict with the nested family, but the API limits us to detect exactly what the conflict is. So normally you'd be seeing Revit prompt you and say, what do you want to do? This is the issue. But we can't display any of that because we're not aware of what the issue exactly is. So the process for this is when you hit OK, the open file or load family window will appear. And within this file name dialog, you can hit Control V and Evolve copy this URL or the file path of this specific family when you click the button. So put it in your clipboard there. And now you can just hit Control V, you can hit open. And now Revit is telling you what the problem is. So here it's the nested GTP point. So you have to choose what to do. Oftentimes, if you're not familiar with families, we'll get asked, which one do I choose? You really have to understand what changes occurred and what's going to happen. Typically, you can use an overwrite. In this case, the change is minimal. It doesn't mean anything, so it's not going to impact anything. If you had added a bunch of parameters specific to your company into a family, it could impact it. So you really have to understand how Revit handles families in this function. But again, it'll just go through each nested family and you can hit OK. Now you load it. So now when I go and load, it's just not going to have a conflict here. Now let me back up and just demonstrate one more thing. So what happens oftentimes when this message appears for the first time is you'll inevitably say, I don't want to see this again, hit OK. This pops up, whether you understood what was going to happen, maybe you didn't, but you kind of cancel out of this, forget that it ever happened. Now, when I click a family, this just appears. I don't get a message telling me what's happening. So this is just popping up on me because I suppressed it. So once you are aware of what's happening and you get this message, you can just hit Control V, hit open, and it'll load and you can do what you have to do. If you find that you potentially, you did suppress those messages, you can reset that by going to your reset workstation settings. And there's a suppressed messages function. So you could just unsuppress them all by hitting OK, selecting it and hitting OK, or you can go to the Manage tab and you can see which messages are suppressed. So you'll see there's my family browser message. And now I can unsuppress it. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. Just again, the big thing is it's a conflict with the family and you need to use basically native Revit to load it in. That's the process there. All right, so the second problem or issue that occurs is when a certain type can't be found. So I have this GUA conduit box. I have 4 types. You'll see there's 4 types in this project. What can happen is I could come in here and delete my 1.5" type. So again, the family browser is not dynamically reading anything in the project. This is just a catalog. But the problem is when I go and click this 1.5", I'm going to get this warning saying, this type does not currently exist. So I deleted the 1.5". So again, it will open up the family now. This is an enhancement. This allows you to have the original family, which would have the types, and then you can load that into your project. And now my type's back. So it's a common thing for whatever reason, types get deleted, but that's kind of how the Evolve will handle it. Okay, so that covers the family conflicts. The next one I want to get into is the evolve title blocks and kind of how this all works. There's a couple common mistakes that occur, but what I'm going to do is I'll go through the family and kind of how it's configured, what the intent is, and how this what to look for. Um, and I'll kind of go through the different features and how they use it, just to kind of clarify all that. But then I'll get into some common questions. Okay, so I'm going to open up a title block here. So starting at the beginning, the evolve title blocks can be found in the local directory, the C drive program file extension here under resources, families. That's where you'll see the title blocks. The template file will have them preloaded. But the title block families themselves are really intended to be kind of starting points, examples of what you can do. The intent is for typically the process is this family is just inserted into your own company title block, and then you configure it accordingly. Let me get my properties back here. Okay, so what we're really looking at is this view window family. This family, it basically defines what type of view or schedule gets created, the properties of that view or schedule, and then the location or the positioning of it relative on your sheet. I'll go through the parameters. When you look at this, this will look in a very standard to all of the evolve parameters, where the parameters that the end user interacts with are all categorized under constraints. And you'll see various little headers here for organization. So I'm going to go through this from top to bottom, just kind of point out what these all do, and then we'll kind of go from there. So the top one here, place on sheet. So this is going to define whether or not the view or schedule that gets created actually gets placed on the sheet. So you can you can actually create views but not place them if you want to. When this is unchecked, there's a little text that appears that just tells you, brings attention to this, because obviously if you're not intending to have this unchecked, it would be something you'd want to be aware of, so you don't expect to see this view when we create the sheet. The next section for annotations, this is going to be a mechanical only options right now. So this can be ignored for Evolve Electrical. The view options section here now is really kind of the properties of the view itself. So you have the option to use a custom view title if you want to not use like the default native Revit title that's going to pull in like you would just dragging a view into the sheet. You can check this box. This will enable this field as an option. You'll see it actually changes the text here, so you can see what you wrote. But that's how you would handle that change. This next parameter here, this is going to be the most important parameter to understand what this is exactly doing. So the view template field here is intended to define or have the user write out the actual view template name that they want to apply to the schedule or view. Oftentimes what happens is when you look at this, Revit provides this little drop down displaying a bunch of values. Initially, it could look like that. It could look like that we're reading from a project file, and these are acceptable parameter values or acceptable view templates. This is just Revit handling a parameter field. Just to demonstrate, if I type in any value there, that value will display here. It's just the same parameter. It's just displaying whatever's in this edit, this family file itself. All right. I'm going to come back to this because this is going to be kind of the root cause of confusion here. So we'll come back to that in more detail. The next parameter is the detail number here. So the actual numbering of the views, if you wanted to standardize that, you would fill in the numbers here. 1, 2, 3, etc. When you do this, you have to consider you need to really number all views uh, to do this, because what's going to happen, unless you're using a different starting number or something, what's going to happen is whatever first view comes in, um, it's going to take number one. And in this case, if this view here came in first, uh, when it gets to inserting this view, when evolve does, it's going to try to set this to number one, but number one is already taken over here. So evolve will prompt you with a warning on this, and it's going to tell you it can't deal with the detailed number. There's a conflict, and it's just going to put out whatever the default numbering is. So when you're using that function, just make sure you do all the numbers to avoid that. The scale to fit, so this is going to be only applicable to views. The scale to fit function will override view templates. So even if your view template is setting a scale with this option checked, you will override that. And the scale to fit is the boundaries of basically this box here. So when this is checked, it is important to expand this window out as needed, which will impact the size of the view that actually gets created. If this is not checked, we're going to use the view template scale that's defined there, and your size of the box won't matter. Really, all that matters is your insertion point, which is your lower left-hand corner. So when you're trying to coordinate, your little detail markers underneath, basically you're going to be adjusting this up or down to kind of impact where the insertion point is of the view exactly. Your height and width parameters are just that. It's just a parameter reading those values. You can certainly use grip handles and things like that to change the size. On the insertion point, real quick, the insertion point for views is the lower left-hand corner, but the insertion point for schedules is going to be the upper left-hand corner. But the sizing does not matter for schedules, because the formatting of the schedule is driven by the view template. So the schedule is just going to expand out to the right based on whatever schedule you're trying to create. So you can certainly play around with this to get it kind of close to what the actual size is. But just know that that's how it's going to behave. So moving on from there, now we get into actually specifying view details or schedule details or properties. The first few sections here are specific to views. With the recent update, this family kind of was merged from two different families because we're dealing with two different types of views. So this gets into the evolve features that create sheets. So we have three main features in evolve that create sheets, and in return creates views and schedules. So we have the spooling function, which utilizes Revit assemblies. So the types of views and schedules are assembly views that are created. These are unique to assemblies and only apply to assemblies. Then we have the packaging tool, which uses standard Revit views and schedules. And then we have the location feature that also uses standard Revit views and schedules. So because of that, when you're looking at this family, we're differentiating between standard views and assembly views. So when you're configuring a title block, keep that in mind. If you are configuring a title block for handling packages, you're not going to want to use assembly views, but standard views, and then vice versa with spooling. Now, just to be aware, with spooling, that is the only feature that can actually use both standard and regular assembly views. So this is also enhancement, so that if you wanted a spool view to include grid lines or backgrounds or something like that, you can mix and match the views. Okay, so starting with standard views, here's your four main types: 3D plan, section, elevation. Based on whether it's a section or elevation, you also have a direction selection to make. So for example, I uncheck this and select my section. First thing you'll notice, if I don't make a direction selection here, it's going to give me a red X with an error message telling me to make the appropriate selection. Once I do, it goes away. The sections and elevations provide some little visual indicators here, kind of just being able to quickly see what you're creating. So this indicates that I'm creating a section as I'm kind of sectioning it looking inward to the middle. And elevation would be the opposite, where I'm looking at from the middle outward. So it's only intended to be kind of visual. So if you were to use the feature, you're creating some sheets, it's not coming out right. When you edit this title block, visually, you should see kind of what you're expecting and what options are selected. That's the intent there. So that kind of covers the standard assembly, standard Revit views. Then we get into assembly views. Now the options for assembly views, why you have section A, B, elevation, top, bottom, etc. These are the views that Revit offers you. So if you were to go to a project file and you have assemblies defined, and if you right click and say create assembly views, these are your options. So those are directly the same options that Evolve gives you to choose from. So the options themselves pretty straightforward. 3D sections, elevations, etc. One thing to point out, the next thing we'll get into is schedules. As I skipped over, these parameters, some of these do have tooltips. So this is something we are adding in on some of the content that we have. So most of the ones that are very important have tooltips, others won't, but just keep that in mind as well. All right, next we get into schedules themselves. So if you're creating a schedule, make sure everything is unchecked up above and your schedule options are only defined here. You basically have two different types of schedules. Again, you have your standard schedule, which is going to use an existing schedule to create it off of. And then you have your assembly schedules. So the difference with assembly schedules are there's two types within there. So I'm going to jump back to my project here and look at what Revit gives me. So I'm going to go back to create assembly views. So down below here, these are my schedule options. So really what we're looking at is a part list, which is going to be in every assembly that's created. And then you have your category specific schedules here. These are basically contain only the categories that are within the spool or the assembly itself. You'll notice there's no conduit schedule option here because that specific assembly does not contain any conduit elements. So Revit just, when they present this, it's just dynamically reading the Revit categories. So when you're defining an assembly schedule with Evolve, you basically are defining either it's a part list, and a part list is a multi-category schedule. It behaves the same exact way as a multi-category schedule does. To just call it something different in assemblies. Or your other option is a single category. And this is where you would actually define the actual Revit category that you want to create. So if I wanted a conduit fitting schedule, I would write conduit fittings. Actually, so it's conduit fittings. Let me just make sure that's what it is, because I believe it is. Because we want to define the Revit category right here, conduit fittings. So if you call it conduit fitting, you get an error saying that category doesn't exist. All right, so let me just back that up. There we go. Okay, so that covers the selection options or the parameter options for the view window. Let's kind of just go through a couple of examples of the three different features, and then I'll kind of backtrack to common problems here. So again, just to kind of see the three features working from within the prefab manager, I can select my spool, and this is where I'm going to have a spool title block. So I use that advanced one. And you'll see I get the two schedules and the views. So here's where my view title here is overlapping my border. So this would be something where I'd want to come in back to my title block, maybe raise it up an inch, load that back into my project. And I could rebuild that sheet from here. And now the views are outside my title block. So the next sheet feature would be your package. So that one's already got one, so I can go ahead and create a package out of these two things. And I'll go ahead and just create a sheet from here. And we have a specific package title block. So most likely for each feature set, you would have a unique title block because you're kind of using them for different purposes. Most often packages are used as like spool maps or more larger element groups. But essentially, these three features are grouping mechanisms uh, of content. So you can kind of use them in different ways. So here is my package result. And if we edit this title block, you'll see it's a little different, but I'm just creating a couple views and the schedule. And the last tool real quick here is the location feature. So I can come into here and again, have a specific location title block. And put up that sheet there. So I'll get a whole bunch of stuff here. This title block probably has a bunch of elevation views configured in it. Yep, so we're getting a bunch of elevations and plan views. So here's an example where my view window, these are not scaled to fit. So my scale is being driven by my view template. So when I click on these views, you see they're already locked in by the view template. So in this case, my view is a lot larger than my sheet. But you can see there's my view, my elevation views, my 3D and plan view there. Okay, so kind of backing up a bit, let's kind of work on this spool drawing. So the most common issue is, again, related to the view template itself. So what oftentimes happens is a view template's going to be defined here that doesn't actually exist in the project. So I'm going to load this into my project. And I'm going to rebuild that sheet. So you'll see one of these views is not like the other. This one's not coming in, the way maybe I would be expecting it. So when you're dealing with views coming in, this can be just wireframe type low detail view. It's going to be the view template's not actually there. Now, what also happens is, let's just say, I'm going to take a schedule here and I'm going to create a view template called test123. So this is the name of the view template that I just defined for that view there. So you may come to your manage view templates and say, hey, that view template is there. It's not working. In this case, I'm actually dealing with a different type of view template, which is specific to schedules versus views. So this itself will cause an error. So let's back up here and respool. So here an error is occurring where it's basically indicating that it's a view template issue. So typically, this is where a support case would be coming out, the title block's just not working anymore. Uh, Now, the process for troubleshooting this is basically identifying where the problem is. Again, the first thing I go is look for view templates, whether they exist or not. But what you want to do is find which view is actually causing the problem. So in this example, that's my problem view. What the way we would do this is you would basically delete all the views but one, and then bring them slowly back in one at a time. So it's a bit of a process, but it's really the only way when you're dealing with a bunch of different custom view templates to figure out what's really triggering the problem. Once you find the view template that's the issue, now you got to see, um, what's the problem with that specific view template. So typically what you would do for the first test is when you go to that view, try to assign test123 to that view. Well, it's not in my list because it's not a view template that's acceptable. So if you can't assign it to the view manually, then that's an indicator that Evolve can't do it programmatically. Um, so that's usually the main issue here. The other thing would be that the view template is hiding things in your view that you're not expecting. But again, take a view that's on a different view template, assign it to the one you're trying to create, and see what happens. Because that's all really Evolve is doing at the end is we're automating a manual process of dealing with view templates and views. Um, Now, the other confusing one is even with schedules and how they deal with view templates, column formatting and everything like that. That is all driven by the view template as well. So the process here, so what could happen is, let's just say you're getting something like this, and it just keeps restricting down the columns, and you're getting these large cell heights and that type of thing. Basically what you want to do is start with a schedule, make it look the way you want it to look. So if I want, this view or this to be really far out there, maybe I don't want to see some of these fields. I want to change my shading of my border here, something obnoxious. All right, so I make it look like what I want it to. Now I can create my view template. I call it a new bomb. And inside my title block here, I can say new bomb. Load that in. go ahead and re-spool it here. Oh, I think I still have that error in the title block. Yep, let me go fix that. This was the error. So we'll just put that back, load it in. Now I get this. Not sure why the blue isn't visible here. But you can see that the column is stretched out just like I had it stretched out here. So typically the process for configuring these types of sheets, you want to start taking a selection of something and doing test runs on an initial sheet. This is where what I would do is take this exact example. I would kind of open up these schedules, manually change them, make the sheet look like I want it to look, and then create the view templates off of the views and schedules that you're dealing with. That could be a quick kind of way to also kind of respool it as you're going and kind of see what the results are. But it can be a process to kind of dial these in to the way you want them to look. I think that was the main topics I want to cover. I guess I'll open it up to questions and see where we go. Okay, so here's a question for my spool conduit bend schedule. I want to see my coupling count if I have them turned on. So let's look at this. So what I'll do here is let me just draw something. Let's see, let's do it right here. We'll just do this. Coupling. Okay, so I'll put something together here and just if this is not the if this doesn't answer the question, just let me know. I'm going to spool those bends. So we'll call it CN1 here. And let's just grab those bends. So this should give me a BOM that has, okay, so there's my two couplings. With my conduit now, when you're saying the conduit bend schedule, what you might be referring to, I guess specifically, is one of these schedules where you may want to see a coupling in here as well. If you wanted to do that, you have to adjust the filtering that's going on because these are filtering specifically by bend type. I guess what you could do, let me just see what happens here. Let's create a view. Let's see, bends. Let's create another schedule here for bends. Oops. This can be that. Okay. Let's load this into the project. And let's rerun that CN1 spool. All right, so here's my bend schedule. So what I would do here is I'd come into this, I'd remove my filters and see what I get here. Because I should get another line item. What's not displayed is my coupling, which is found in my description. So you're gonna have to format this the way you want, but there's my two couplings. So you'll see I have my bend element here, then I have my couplings. You'll also get some blank rows that have to be filtered out, which could be miscellaneous shared families that are found within these other families. But hopefully this answers the question. So what I would do is I would again, I grab the schedule that I want. Now I've modified it to what let's just say this is what I want to be, or I want it to be. I would come into here and update that view template here and call this bends, update that. And now when I respool it, it would give me this result. So hopefully that answers that question. Another question here, when will legends be available to use? Yeah, I can't answer that right now. You'll notice that it's a placeholder in the view window for legends and drafting views. So it is planned. We have a couple of more things that we have to do on this front. There's going to be more options that we build into some of here that give you more granularity control. So we got to layer that in first, and then we will probably tackle legends and drafting views. So hopefully it is something we can get to this year. When dimensioning an evolve item, then select that item. The dimension doesn't get small and allow me to adjust. So I'm not really sure what that exactly means, but let's just look at something here. And again, I'll kind of take a stab at what's being asked here. So if you were dimensioning something, you could be experiencing something like this, where it's not attaching to the element, especially with 3D views. The quick tool for setting a work plane is kind of the go-to tool for that, where you can set a plane. Oh, I wonder if this is not happening. Let's see what happens here. Yep, that works. Okay. So here would be how I would dimension that. The message that came up, if I do this again, it should pop up again. I think in assembly views or in certain conditions, again, limitations of the API, we're not able to pull a certain command. When I hit OK here, it's just kicking me, or should have kicked me to the, I was on another window, to the native pick plane tool, which is just this tool here. So hopefully that answers the question there.
Thanks so much, Adam. If there's any last minute questions, now is the time to get those in.
Here's a question: hangers, panels, etc. on floor plans. Not really sure if there's a question there. If you can elaborate on that, not really sure what that's asking. Oh, support for additional hanger types. So that is going to be an upcoming enhancement. It's going to be a very global thing with any evolve feature that uses a family. Think sleeves, hangers, the duck bank spacers. Might be another one or so. But those features we're going to create more customizable family configurations for those. So that is one of the more priority features that will be coming. And with that, we'll be building out some more hanger families and things like that as well. So. So here's one having problems placing mini conduit supports, go through the process of that. So I can certainly do that. Here, I'll just use a run here. So there's actually a common issue that happens with this, and maybe this is the problem. Let me just create a new rule. Oops. Uh, okay. So I'm defining my spacing. Not going to go through this, but that's your spacing between hangers. The main thing we're looking at here is using a mineral on a single conduit. So I can go in ahead and hit my hanger hardware size. What's often overlooked is this max conduit size, which is coming in at 0. What this is saying is, what is the maximum conduit size that you want to use a mineral support on? So if you only wanted to support up to 2-inch, you would set that. So if I were to model a 2.5-inch, it's not going to get a mini, it's going to get a trapeze. If you want it on any conduit, just put that right to the max, and it'll just put it on anything. So we don't care about any of the family settings here or clash detection. So we're just focused on this. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. And then the process here will just be, of course, the traditional make a selection, pick a direction. You'll notice the 3D view is opening. Here, let me just go to that 3D view so you can see the results here. And then I'll just talk about something real quick. So there's all my minis spaced accordingly. So hopefully that answers the question there. Again, if I had to guess, the most common reason this doesn't work is because of this max conduit size not set correctly. And just to point out, when I did that placement, it opened a 3D view. Just remember, we have this option to create a view during placement, which you can turn off. It doesn't guarantee clash detection or collision detection for structure and things like that if it's off, but it saves performance. So just keep that in mind. Question here for Revit 24 support. So that will be part of the 7.0 update. So 24 will be coming with that. This should be out within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So the question here is, what does it look like when selecting a hanger family? Can I change the name of the hanger family? You can. So the family name you can't change right now because that's what we look for when using the feature. You can make different types. Well, yeah, you're probably not even going to want to make types. You can certainly make other families if you keep this type of naming convention in there. I think you can add, a word or two in the middle or something, and it will still work. But if you're trying to manipulate a family to use the tool, you kind of have to start with what we have and then modify it from there. But if I just flat out change this to a whole new name, it won't work. Tagging evolved bend families can be difficult if they are all in a row. Is there anything in the works for an auto tagging? So we are going to take the mechanical tagging function into a core feature, which is basically a rule-based tagging feature. I don't have anything set up right now, but that'll probably be the first go at introducing in, say, an automatic annotation feature here. That'll be not in 7.0 or upcoming. It'll probably be later this year. Okay, here's another one. Also, I've noticed embed attachment type is more of a strut connection since it's a strut nut. Yep. Is there any outlook for adding window clamps to hanger families? We have many cases where steel is different heights, and one side of the window clamp, and the other is a beam clamp. I also like to see rods 1 and 3 be able to turn off. Um, so thanks for the suggestion there. For additional attachments and things like that, any family content enhancements and things really would be best to throw it on the idea site. I'll take a copy of this and make sure we add it. Uh, but the idea site, while we I try to keep this up to date as best as we can. This is a great place for us to gather the feedback. Obviously, we can't just jump on every little thing that's here, but it is a great way to keep track of these requests and to see where there's most activity. So we are doing more with hangers. We're looking to try to make more flexibility with generic attachments, meaning give you the flexibility to call the attachment whatever you want, and then maybe control some generic geometry around it to reserve the space. So it doesn't lock you into some part description that we chose for you. It won't have the most detail, obviously, but it would be the most flexible. So we've been working on some of those ideas. Here's a question. If I were to pull a dimension between two panels and then select one panel, um, oh, here, this might clarify. Tim doesn't get small. Oh, okay. So the question is going to be about it's this behavior, I believe, is the question. When you have an active dimension line so that you can move something, the question is specific to electrical panels. You're probably going to be used to panels out of the box, Revit panels. Oops, mechanical here. Out of the box, like Revit panels, you're going to be able to kind of do that active dimensioning. But with Evolve, and I'm just going to throw it in here. The question is basically, if I have this dimension here, when I click on this family, this does not become an active dimension. This is a result of the way the family is built. So whenever you nest a family into a host family, you lose active dimensioning. I think it's actually a shared nested family will lose it. If it was unshared, you would still keep it. So that's a result of the nesting. And so in this case, we have an equipment, a clearance zone nested in here. So can't get PVC female adapters to show in schedules when selected in PVC factory elbows. Let's see if we have that covered, because I believe that was submitted as a problem. So let's see, factory elbow, PVC. And the question's going to be, put my female adapters on. Yeah, it's coming in a PVC coupling. This is 2020. Let me just make sure here. Let's just see if I have this addressed in a upcoming. All right, while that's loaded. Oh, okay, so I answered that one. All right, bear with me while I just load this in. Another one. Oh, select the panel. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm gonna get sidetracked here because someone's mentioning something about the active dimension. Select the panel and hit active dimension. Where? I'm not sure where active dimension is being referenced. It's on the ribbon. line dimension. Here, I'll come back to it. I don't want to get sidetracked. I just want to see if I get this working. Sorry. All right, let's go to my new project here. Let me just load this in. If this is not addressed, I'll get this corrected, but I do remember someone bringing this up. So I'm just going to check the 7.0 update here. Factory elbow, PVC. Nope, still PVC coupling. I'll get that submitted as an issue. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, well, I'll get sidetracked on this active dimension thing. If there's no other questions, somewhere in the ribbon by the file name. Oh, geez. Green space. So, oh, active dimension. There we go. You would think that would be it. There it is. I love it. All right, I created a simple filter to filter out conduits lower than 1.25 inches in size. When I applied this filter and changed the value of the conduit bend, the bend disappears. The only way to make it reappear was to uncheck and recheck convert checkbox or reattach the adjacent conduit. Any idea why this would be happening? Element filter. Dave, is this an element filter, I assume? Core, I've uncheck and recheck convert. I guess, let's see. I'm not sure why that would be happening. If you can, Dave, send me the filter or the sample project that you're using to do it, and I'll see if I can test it. Something to check for is possibly using internal filtering when running it. Make sure included nested elements is checked, especially when you're dealing with bends. That would be the only thing I could think of there. If it's a regular Revit filter, oh yeah, okay, so it's a regular Revit filter. You may need to evaluate a different parameter. It may be the way Revit is updating the bend family and when it's recognizing the diameter change. I can play around with something to see if I can replicate it. Unless you have a project you can send me to look at, but offhand, I don't know. I would probably suggest to look at a different parameter and try that.
All right, Adam, do we have time for a few more questions or do you want to reach out to these folks after the webinar?
Sure. One more came in. What's the best way to place a coupling on a loose end of straight conduit? So if it's just placing like a single coupling, I would just pull it in, getting a coupling. So there's my coupling, and I should be able to just snap it right to the end of a loose conduit. So hopefully that's what it was. Coupling should auto size and attach. If you're dealing with stacked conduit and it's, a lot of things going on in the area, isolate the view, use a 3D view, things like that. help with it.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, Adam.
Mhm.
And that will just about wrap us up for the day. So great. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar. We hope that you found the information valuable. Please make sure to follow us on social media and you can keep up with all of our upcoming webinars. And you can always find more demos and past webinars on our YouTube channel. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and we will send out the recording in an email to all registrants. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us and have a great day.